Hello, Michael here with another How Do I Render tutorial. Today we're going to be having a look at how to render this frying pan, which we modeled in the previous tutorial. If you haven't seen that, make sure you go back and check it out if you want to know how to model it. We're going to be looking at a couple of different things when we render this, just how to get these varying specular reflections using pxrFlake and facing ratio, how to set up the handle to look like that soft rubber, and how to get that really simple metallic look there and just the overall scene. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so let's get our objects into the scene. So grab the bowl. I've actually created a new one with UVs, and I'll show you what I've done for that a little bit further on in the tutorial. But we've got our three parts to the mesh here, which consists of the bowl or tray. We've got the metal mount for the handle, and then the handle obviously. And we can smooth subdivide all those. And also in the scene you'll see that I've got the backdrop already set up and a light. Okay, so now that everything's in place, let's start setting up some materials. We'll do the easy parts first, which is going to be the rubber handle, a soft rubber handle, and then the metal mount. We'll just create a pxrSurface material. We'll use the attribute editor here, so just pxrSurface that's the handle. So we'll call this pxr handle. And this is going to be a fairly dark diffuse color, somewhere there roughly. And I'm going to turn the roughness on the diffuse channel all the way up. And it's going to have a real little bit of specularity. And the roughness is going to be 0.5. I think that is the settings I used when I tested this out. So let's just run an IPR. Alright, so our scene is way too dark. Let's increase our light. And I'm actually going to chuck a HDRI light in using a dome light. I'll just add one in real quick that I've got on my computer. Alright, and I've just reduced the intensity of the HDRI down to 0.5 because I really want most of my light to be coming from this, and I'll increase that to maybe 50. Yeah, so let's zoom in on the handle. The frying pan that I've got in my kitchen has got this sort of soft rubbery type material, so it's not really a plastic. Like if you use your fingernail and you could scratch into it, it's sort of that sort of soft. So you want it to have a little bit of specularity. It's a pretty rough surface though, because it's not reflecting a lot. So it's almost waxy. So you get that by increasing the roughness and having a very minor amount of specular face color. So I've just put it at 0.011. So, and then just define your diffuse color, and that's pretty much all there is to that. Next we'll move into the mount. So the mount has got the screws also, so bear that in mind. Once again, pxrSurface. We will change the diffuse color to be black and the face color to be white. And we'll start there. And we'll call this handle mount. Alright, so and actually having the HDRI makes that a little bit easier to see the reflection, otherwise it kind of reflects too much black if there's just no HDRI image. So that's a very clean metal. You could sort of reduce the specularity of it or increase the diffuse color to get it to be a bit more plasticky if you wanted. And then also if you want it to be a little bit more worn, increase the roughness, get it to a point where you're happy. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I don't think the metal part is the most interesting, and it's pretty easy to set up. You just need to sort of play around with it. You could run some procedurals into it if you wanted to get some variation in the metal, like it's been worn or something like that, or you could UV it and paint in some roughness or some oxidization or something like that. But I'm going to keep that pretty clean. This is going to be like a new pan fresh out of the box. So not looking too bad straight off the bat. We've got the handle done, we've got the mount done, so that's the easy parts. But now we're going to head into the bowl part, and this is where things get interesting. So I mentioned earlier that I UV mapped this, so I'll show you what I've done in the UV editor. So what I've got is I've got the underside and then the inside are two different UV shells, and then I've got the ring around the edge there set to a different 4 different UVs and UV shells or islands. And the reason I've done that is so I can apply different materials to the two of them using the Pixar layer surface. And I also, while I remember, I'm going to jump back into that and go to edge mode. I'm also going to give this lip a bit of a hard edge. So I'm going to select those edges as rings, just holding down shift and clicking the one next to it to get the entire ring. I think this one as well. So those 3 poly loops there are the separate UV island. So this part here is going to be a different color to the rest of the bowl, and I'll show you the UV map for it as well. So you can't see anything here. So as I mentioned, you've got actually this is the old UVs, but I've actually laid that out so it's not overlapping. So that's the ring there, and the top part that's black, and then the bottom part that's white is the bowl shapes. If I go to channels and turn on the alpha, what you can see I've done here is I've just created a black alpha for the top part and then a white alpha for the bottom, and I'm just going to use this to drive the different materials using the Pixar layer surface. So if you were editing your UV layer in Photoshop, you need to make sure that you add in an alpha channel, otherwise this won't work. But essentially, this is only going to work as a mask. I'm not using this to create any textures or anything like that. So I also didn't really want to show the UV process because I don't use Maya to UV. I UV in 3D Coat, and this is sort of more of a Maya tutorial. So if you know how to UV in Maya, just create the separate UVs for the ring, and then for the inside part and the outside part to your heart's content. If you do want sort of to see what I do with the UVs, I just did a really bad job of UVing it in 3D Coat, but it works, so that's fine, and it gets the result. So let's jump into the Hypershade editor. Actually, before we do that, we'll assign a Pixar layer surface to that. So right clicking on that and Pixar layer surface. So this is going to be our pan edge, and this is going to be the pan base. I'll change that to pan bowl so it's not confusing. So the reason I'm putting the edge in this part is just the way I've laid out the alpha in Photoshop or for the UVs. So this is going to be sort of like a bare metal color, and then this is going to be the sort of anodized, painted, sort of soft specular, non-stick material. That's a lot of descriptive words. So we want to get the alpha in so we can define these two things. So I'm just going to, for the moment, enable the diffuse channel on both and set one to black and one to white. I'll turn the roughness up on that one, and we'll hit tab here and type in Pixar texture. We'll open up the alpha that I've created. That's that one there. And then this alpha is going to go into our layer 1 mask. So now when I render this, you'll see that the edge is white and the bowl is black. And having that hard edge there just breaks things up a little bit, and also having the sort of white intersection there of the silhouette sort of makes it stand out a bit better. So that's why I ended up doing that. I initially was just going to do this all one shader, but I thought that looked a little bit better, and it was sort of a neat trick that you guys might appreciate. If you want to know more about Pixar Layer Mixer as well, or Pixar Layer Surface, make sure you check out the specifics tutorial for it. I go into a lot more detail, so I'm just going to sort of breeze through it a little bit here, just so we don't get in the weeds when I've already got a tutorial out for this sort of thing. But the main thing about this is going to be setting up the materials for the bowl. That's a little bit more interesting. So the edge is a pretty basic metal. You could add some variation into it, say by using a Pixar Vor noise, and if we use an invert, we can make this look like metal by running the RGB out into the specular face color, and then just the regular RGB out into the diffuse color, and then make sure that you go to primary specular and turn that on. And then you can define the roughness. I'm going to stick with 0.2. It's going to be pretty specular, and you'll probably only just be able to tell the difference. It's a little bit lower value, and you can go on and sort of change the values to your heart's content, but it'll also depend on the camera angle based on the light. So yeah, it's a little bit hard to see still. I've got that smooth side right, yep. But that will vary the surface just a little bit, or you could just go straight black and white, black diffuse, white specular color, and then you'll get a much more reflective surface and turn the roughness down, etc. You could even run the roughness using the pxrFlakes, like the RGBR, specular roughness, if you want it to look a little bit more diffused. But because this is such a minor part of the overall model, you're not actually going to see it unless you're doing a sort of really extreme close-up. But I just thought I'd point that out as well. And also a good way to test these materials is if we just go to polygons, we'll create a plane, and then we'll assign that same shader to this plane. This is often how I will test materials. So with that selected, just assign to material. So we can IPR that now. And you see that that right hand side there's the metal side, and that left hand side is just the diffuse, which is going to be the bowl in a moment. So I think I'm still going to turn that light up a bit, you know what? Okay, so you can sort of see the metalness here. I've just angled that away a little bit. Actually, I'll just turn it back a touch. So you can see the metallicness is a little bit hard to see because of the diffuse. It might even be a bit too rough, I think. I'm going to get rid of that specular roughness adjustment there and make the roughness 0.2. Yeah, that's much better. And turn the gain up. I had been doing that without the gain on. That was silly. So now we're actually getting the specularity that we want. Sorry, I overlooked that. I always do that when I'm working in Pixar layer, because you have to enable each channel, which obviously you don't have to do when you're just working with the Pixar surface. So don't be like me and forget. So maybe let's try plugging that RGBR back into the edge color and see what sort of that looks like. Yeah, that's sort of varied the specularity a little bit more. It's kind of interesting. I think I might stick with it. All right, so now let's set up our bowl. So the bowl is a little bit more interesting. The first thing we're going to do is give it a diffuse color. It's just going to be a little bit 0.011 again is what we're going to use. We're also going to enable I'm going to use rough specular here. It doesn't actually make a difference, but it's just habit. Make sure you turn the gain up. And we are going to plug in a couple of different things here that I don't think I've really shown before on the channel, but we're going to use a facing ratio, and we're going to use paint flakes. And this is just going to create the sort of anodized, well, basically with types of aluminium and I think other types of metal like iron and stuff, anodizing them is a way to treat them, which makes them sort of more porous and allows them to be painted with reflective paint. So you'll find that the specularity changes to be similar to the paint color that way. You could even for example, like the back of colored iPhones, that's a good example. The way they've painted that with if you've got one of those gold ones, the reflection will be that gold color as well. So they anodize that so they can paint the gold paint onto it, and then you'll see the effects of that. And then they usually seal it with a sort of coating, which is oftentimes specular as well. So you'll see those layers through the specular sealant. But what we want to do is get a Pixar facing ratio. You've got a couple of options with use. You've got camera and direction. We're going to use camera to start with. I am going to clamp it, and we'll keep the gamma at 1 for the moment, and we'll expand that just using 3, and then we'll get pxrFlakes. We're going to use our result F into flake amount, and then jump into this guy here. We're going to increase the flake frequency to like 200. It's quite a lot. And the flake density, we'll leave at 1.0 for now. The size we'll leave at 1.0, but I'm actually going to reduce that. I just want to show you the difference between them. And jitter can stay at 0.75 for now as well. And then we want to run that out to, so this is going to be the result in out, and we're going to run that into our diffuse, our specular rough. Just going to hit 3 on that one and expand it out. Normal is what we want. Result rough specular normal. So it's going to vary the direction of the reflection on that. So we'll run an IPR here. And actually, I don't believe you're going to be able to see it on this plane, so we'll hide the plane. And we also need to add some actual specularity in, so we'll just increase the face color a little bit here. And obviously you get the specularity. And we'll just increase that edge color to be white. Okay. So you can see that with having the different facing ratio that, all right, so you can see that the having the facing ratio on the normal sort of reflects the light in different directions. So around the specular highlight, you'll get sort of some, with the flakes, you'll get some random bits of specularity. So it sort of creates this idea of porousness while being specular at the same time. But obviously at the moment, this is looking way too hardcore. So we'll go into our attribute editor. Actually, no, we'll just do it in Hypershade. So on our pxrFlakes, if we reduce the flake size to 0.35, this will reduce the appearance of it. And I might just reduce the density just a touch. And I think I had it at 0.8 before on the jitter. So let's now increase our roughness, because that wasn't what was happening before that I thought it was. So we just want to get it to sort of somewhere between diffused and specular. I don't know if you've got a non-stick fry pan at home, but they sort of are, they are a little bit specular depending on how much of the non-stick agent is applied to them. But they're not really waxy, but they're not really sort of glossy either. Something close to this, I think. But now what you might notice is that we're getting these random facing ratio reflections from the flakes, and this is where use comes in. So having it set to camera will depend, it's not relative to the surface normal of the object, it's relative to the where the camera is. So you'll every now and then get a random reflection of your normal. So what we can do is change that to direction, which is now going to keep the reflections within range of your specular highlights, which I think is a little bit more realistic in this case. For things like car paint, you might want to use camera. It will just increase the overall sort of effect of the flakes, and you'll see that in like pearlescent sort of finishes in cars. But I think that's looking a little bit closer now. You could decide whether or not you want to make your flakes smaller or probably not larger at this point, or if you want to have more of them. I'm going to play around with it for a sec and see what I think. Okay, yeah, that's looking a bit more like I want it to. So we're getting random bits of specularity as you get further away from the reflection point. So that sort of like starts to look a little bit more like that sort of anodized non-stick effect, as well as having that rough surface. You can see a little bit of patterning happening, but it's not particularly obvious, I don't think. And having the highly specular screws there will get a little bit of reflection on the actual inside of the pan itself, and it's causing some reflection there as well. Don't confuse the flakes for noise, and it's actually worth mentioning that you're going to be careful when using denoise here, because it might reduce the overall appearance of the specular highlights from the flakes. So just beware of that. Check your denoised image while you're working on this. Just run a batch with denoise, like I'm going to do in a moment, just to finalize this. But I think we're looking pretty good now. If we just sort of zoom out, we'll get this in sort of medium shot. Yeah, I think that looks pretty much like a pan to me. I don't know about you guys, but it looks like my real cheap Kmart pan that I got when I was like living by myself in my early 20s. So yeah, I think that will do it. Hopefully this has been very useful for you. If you did like it, make sure you click the like button so other people can find this on YouTube. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed so you can check out all of these tutorials that I put up every week, a couple at least, for things like Renderman and as you would have seen previously, the ZBrush tutorial and other CG products. If you want to stay up to date further, make sure you check out the Facebook page, link in the description. That's it for now though. Thank you very much for watching and happy rendering.